Autumn's Embrace, Chapter 8. Winter crept into Willow Creek quietly, as if it were waiting for the last of the autumn leaves to fall before it made its entrance. The days grew shorter, the air sharper, and the skies turned a soft, steel gray. The townspeople began to bundle up in heavy coats and scarves, and Elliot, still adjusting to the slower pace of country life, found himself enjoying the anticipation of the first snowfall. There was something peaceful about the transition, the way the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the transformation that winter would bring. It had been a few days since Lily had stopped by the farmhouse, and in that time, Elliot's mind had been working overtime. The job offer from New York still loomed in the back of his thoughts, but his growing feelings for Lily complicated everything. He had never been one to dwell on indecision, but this was different. It wasn't just about his career anymore. It was about his future, and whether that future included Lily and Willow Creek. The farmhouse, now mostly renovated thanks to his hard work and a bit of help from Jeff, had become a haven for him. It was a place where he could retreat, think, and when necessary, escape from the thoughts that weighed heavily on his mind. As he stood by the window one evening, looking out over the now barren trees and the frost-covered fields, a knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Elliot turned, wondering who could be visiting at this hour. His heart did a little flip, hoping it might be Lily. He crossed the room and opened the door, and sure enough, there she was, bundled up in her coat and scarf, her cheeks pink from the cold. A soft smile played on her lips as she brushed a few strands of hair from her face. "Hey," she said, her voice soft in the crisp evening air. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Elliot replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Come in. It's freezing out there." Lily stepped inside, unwrapping her scarf and pulling off her gloves. "I wanted to see how you were doing," she said, her eyes scanning the room as if she were taking in the warmth of the farmhouse. "And I thought we could talk." Elliot felt a knot tighten in his chest. The conversation he had been avoiding seemed to be looming once again, but this time he knew they couldn't dance around it any longer. "Sure," he said, nodding toward the living room. "Let's sit by the fire." They settled into the cozy living room, the flames crackling softly in the wood stove, casting a warm glow over the room. The tension between them was palpable, not in a confrontational way, but in the way that signaled the importance of what was left unsaid. Lily sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped together in her lap, her gaze focused on the flickering flames. After a moment, she broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about New York." Elliot swallowed. His pulse quickened. He knew this conversation had to happen, but that didn't make it any easier. "Me too." Lily looked up at him, her hazel eyes soft and searching. "Elliot, I don't want you to feel like you have to stay here because of me. I know how much that job means to you, and I don't want to be the reason you give it up." Her words were kind, but there was a sadness in her voice that tugged at Elliot's heart. He shook his head, leaning forward slightly. "It's not just about the job, Lily. It's about what I want for my life, and I'm not sure that going back to New York is what I want anymore." Lily's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "You're not?" Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I thought it was. I thought that job, that life, was what I needed to feel fulfilled. But being here, being with you, it's changed things. I found something here that I didn't have in the city. Peace, maybe? Or just space to breathe." Lily was quiet for a long moment, her gaze dropping to her hands as she absorbed his words. The crackling fire filled the silence, but the air between them felt thick with the weight of everything left unsaid. Finally, she looked up, her voice soft. "I've been scared." Elliot's heart clenched at her admission. He had sensed it in the way she had hesitated when they talked about the future, but hearing it aloud made it all the more real. "Scared of what?" "Scared that you'd realize this life isn't enough for you," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That you'd want more, something bigger, something that Willow Creek can't offer. I didn't want to get too close because I was afraid you'd leave." Elliot felt a pang of guilt at her words. He had never intended to make her feel that way, but he understood where she was coming from. The uncertainty of his future had hung between them like a shadow, and now it was time to bring it into the light. "I don't know what the future holds," Elliot said quietly, his gaze fixed on hers. "But I know that I don't want to make decisions out of fear. I want to make them because they're right for me, for us." Lily's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I just don't want you to regret staying." "I won't," Elliot said firmly. "I'm not going to regret choosing the life that makes me happy, and I'm starting to realize that life might be here with you." There was a long pause, and in that moment something seemed to shift between them. The fear and uncertainty that had lingered in the air began to melt away, replaced by a quiet understanding. Lily's eyes shimmered with emotion, and for the first time since they had met, Elliot felt as though the walls between them were beginning to crumble. Before either of them could speak, the first flakes of snow began to drift past the window, soft and delicate, like a quiet promise of what was to come. Lily's gaze shifted to the window, her lips curving into a smile as she watched the snow fall. "The first snow," she murmured, her voice filled with wonder. Elliot followed her gaze, his own heart lifting at the sight. There was something magical about it, the way the world seemed to transform in an instant. The sharp edges of the landscape softened by the blanket of white. "It's beautiful," he said softly. Lily turned back to him, her eyes sparkling. "Do you want to go outside?" Elliot chuckled, but the idea was appealing. There was something freeing about the thought of stepping out into fresh snow, of leaving behind the heavy conversation and just being in the moment. Why not? They bundled up in their coats and scarves, stepping outside into the stillness of the night. The snow fell steadily now, coating the ground in a thin layer of white. It crunched under their boots as they walked out onto the porch, the cold air biting at their cheeks, but neither of them seemed to mind. Lily twirled in the falling snow, her laughter echoing softly in the quiet night. There was a childlike joy in her movements, and Elliot found himself smiling as he watched her, feeling lighter than he had in days. "You're going to get covered in snow," he teased, though there was no real concern in his voice. Lily grinned at him, brushing the snow from her sleeves. "I don't care. It's worth it." They stood there for a while, watching as the snow continued to fall, their breath visible in the cold air. It was a quiet, intimate moment, and Elliot felt as though the weight of the world had lifted from his shoulders. There was no pressure here, no need to make any decisions right now, just the two of them, the snow and the peaceful stillness of the night. Lily turned to him after a while, her eyes bright and full of warmth. "Thank you," she said softly. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For staying," she said simply, her voice filled with sincerity. "For choosing to be here." Elliot felt a lump from his throat, and he nodded, his heart full. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Lily smiled, and in that moment, everything felt right. The doubts, the fears, the uncertainties, they were still there, but they didn't feel as daunting anymore. They were part of the journey, part of figuring out what came next. But for now, standing in the first snowfall of the season, Elliot knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. As they stood in the snow, their hands brushing against each other, Elliot felt something shift deep within him. He had spent so long running, chasing after the next goal, the next achievement, that he had forgotten how to simply be. But here, in this small town, with Lily by his side, he was beginning to understand what it meant to truly live. The first snow fell gently around them, a quiet reminder that change was inevitable, but it could also be beautiful. And in that moment, Elliot knew that whatever decision he made, it would be the right one, because he had finally found what he had been searching for all along: peace, love, and a place to call home. If you like this chapter, please leave a like and comment Don't forget to share and follow, and stay tuned for Chapter 9 of Autumn's Embrace.